having a talk. So, our speaker will discuss the importance of recommendation letters and letters of continued interest. She will also give tips on how to properly approach teachers and counselors when asking for letters of recommendation and talk about her experience in writing letters of continued interest. But before we proceed to the talk, let's lay down some house rules. So first, please do not spam the Q&A box or send any inappropriate messages. So everyone at camp is working very hard to make your conference experience amazing, so please be respectful at all times. All questions must be sent in the Q&A box. Questions in the chat box might get lost in all the messages. So now that we're familiar with all the house rules, please allow me to introduce our panelists for this session. So Marga is an incoming freshman at the University of San Francisco, majoring in international studies. She was awarded the highest scholarship upon admission and is currently part of the Honors College and the Martin Barrows Scholars Program. She graduated from Colegio San Agustin Makati and was the president of her school's Model United Nations organization. Currently, she is also a part of Camp's marketing team, working as a social media manager. So let's give another round of applause for Marga.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be talking about something that's really important in all college applications, no matter where you're applying, I believe, and that's letters of recommendation. So everyone who applied to at least one college or a few knows what this is. So first, I want to start with the definition. So what is it? It's a common requirement in college applications that elaborates more about you as a student. So your notable achievements, your values, and yeah, everything that the college admissions officer should know about you. And I like to think of it as a second set of essay responses, except that they're not written by you, they're written by your teachers. So if we think about it, your whole application, it's trying to answer one question, and it's who are you? And that's the overarching theme. So the admissions officer, they're trying to see who is this student? Would they be a good fit? Should they be admitted? So that's the overarching question. And the reco letters are another way of letting them get to know you. And generally, you need to know, you need to have two recommenders. That's the average. So normally that's your counselor and your teacher. But this does vary from school to school. So some schools, they don't require any recommendation letters. It's completely optional. But some schools might
Oh,
require
Marga, sorry.
three or
I
more.
just wanted to tell you, I think I'm only seeing the first slide on my end. So yeah, okay, there.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, just let me know if the slides are showing. Sorry. So yeah. So some schools, it really depends school to school how many they require. But generally it's two, your counselor and your teacher. So another tip is to stick to professionals in your school who have taught you in recent years and for a decent amount of time. So maybe you were really close with your first grade advisor and you know that they really like you, but they might not be the best person to choose to recommend you to write you a letter because they don't know you recently. You're not the same person in grade 7 as you are now in grade 11, incoming grade 12. And for a decent amount of time, it might be difficult if you have a teacher in senior high school who you want to recommend to you, but you feel like hasn't taught you for that long. So you think, do they know me that much? And we'll get into that. We'll get more into that later. That's what a brag sheet is for. So we'll discuss that later. So just my tip is once you know the schools that you want to apply to, you take note of how many recommenders they require, or if they even require recommenders at all, so that you're on top of it and you know how many people you'll need to ask. So next, another question you might think is what qualities or experiences should be highlighted in order to have an effective recommendation letter. So we know that recommendation letters are really important in your application. It's another chance for you, for the short amount of time that your application is being reviewed, to show the school that you should be admitted. So my top tip for this is you want to make sure that they round out your application. So what does this mean? Your application isn't just showing one side of you. It's not just, do you have high grades or were you the president of your clubs? They're trying to get to know you as a whole person. So it depends. We're all different students, so we have different types of applications. So you might have a spike, so you might have a specific thing that sets you apart from other students, or you might be, say, really focused in academics, in science and math. So what you want your recommendation letter to do is to show another side of you to the admissions officer. So for example, if your application is really academics heavy, then you want to humanize yourself through your essays and also your recommendation letter. And in the next slide, I'll show you an example of this. So basically, a recommendation letter is from the teacher letting the admissions officer know their experience with you, but you also don't want them to just list out the same things that they're going to see in other parts of your application. So I'll be showing an example. So we have two examples here and I'll read them out for you guys. So letter 1, your name is an exceptional student who is passionate about X, Y, and Z. They lead multiple clubs and have created a profound impact on their school community. They are well liked and excel academically on top of their extracurriculars, winning A, B, and C, so maybe competitions. We'll compare this to letter 2. Your name is a diligent student within the classroom, earning a number of academic awards. They also manifest their passion for X, Y, and Z by leading a number of clubs, and in the years I have taught them, they have grown and risen to take on a mentor role to younger students by means of A, B, and C. So letter 1, it's not a horrible letter, and this might be the typical standard letter that you think of when you think of a teacher writing a student a recommendation letter. And it's not bad, but it comes across as like a bullet point list. They're just stating off points about you that can be observed from other parts of your application. So they know that you're a student, a passionate student who leads these clubs. They can see that in your activities list in the Common App, and they can see your awards and things like that. They can see that you care about your grades, but you also care about your activities. That's nothing new to the officer reading your application. Whereas letter 2, it's more of a personal stance. It gives anecdotes. As much as possible, you want your recommender to provide anecdotes. And that's why it's so important that they know you, that they have experience with you in the classroom or in clubs. They can see firsthand why you're such a great student. Not to sound like you're sucking up, but that's really what we're trying to show here. They can see firsthand why you're so exceptional and why you deserve to be in the school. And they can make that apparent in their letters of recommendation. So you want them to give personal examples. They can be like, oh, I remember when this student, they really stepped up in the classroom when we had this project. Those little details, it's what makes your admissions officer remember you and care about you, since the whole point of your application is for you to make them care about you and your story and you as a student, not just about what you've achieved and your grades. So next slide. Another question is, how can I establish a strong connection with my teachers or counselors to ensure that they are able to write an impactful letter on my behalf? How can I help them understand my study abroad goals to help them write a more personalized letter? So as much as possible, you want to be close with the teachers that you're asking so that your letter isn't just cut and, copy and paste and that's it. You want them to really leave an impression on the person reading it. So I have 3 tips for this and for recommendation letters in general. So the first tip is to know yourself. You want to know the story you're trying to tell because with your application, there's a story that you're telling, even though it might be, you might not be thinking of it consciously, but you're painting a picture of yourself. So there's not a lot of space where you can do that. It's your essays and your letter, and that's sort of it. So you need to know, what kind of student am I? What kind of student am I trying to be perceived as? So again, second point, it's all about making the officer care about you. If you meet them, because for me, I was able to meet my admissions officer who made the decision to let me in, and they won't remember you because of your high scores. They won't remember you because of a really prestigious award that you got. They'll remember you because of something that strike them about you as a person in your application. So for me, that was my essay and about how one of the activities I was doing throughout high school really changed me. And that's something that they mentioned to me personally. So tip number 2 is to know, oh, sorry, if you guys didn't see, this is the slide for tip 1. I'm not sure if it's showing properly. Okay. So for tip number 2 is to know who you're asking. So firstly, consider the needs of your school. You should know what type of student you are, but you should also know what kind of school you're applying to. This school, do they prioritize a certain area? Are they more of like a science school or more of an arts school? And that can also dictate the kind of teacher that you ask. Not all schools look at this, but some do, and it's better to be safe than sorry. And another point to consider, does this professional know you personally? That's a point that you'll see a lot. And know your story, as we discussed in the first slide, and make it clear to them. So you might think that it's really obvious why you're asking them to write you a letter, but to them, they don't know why you asked them specifically. And so basically, you need to make it clear to them why you're asking them and why they should write a letter for you. And we're going to discuss that more in the next slides. So for tip number 3, after dealing with the first 2 tips, we can start preparing already. So you'll want to take notes of your deadlines, email addresses of the teachers or of the schools, and online resources. If you're applying through Common App, they actually have a page called recommendation letter guides. So PDFs that you can send to your teacher with formats. Just search Common App recommendation letters and it should show up. And also prepare your brag sheet. We'll discuss what the brag sheet is also later. So requesting your letter. It's a request, not a demand, so be courteous and polite. Not all teachers, well, most of the time teachers will agree to write you a letter, but some teachers, they might be busy or have other commitments, so you can't expect all of them to say yes. Teachers aren't required to write you letters. It's just something that they do out of the kindness of their hearts. So be polite and understand if they can't. And you'll also want to give them ample time. Ideally, you'd want to ask them 3 to 4 months before you need the letter, which is a long time. I know that not all of us are able to ask our teachers that early. There are instances where me or my friends, it was just a month before or maybe 2 weeks before. And that's not ideal, but the earlier is the better. So this is the sample structure of how you'll ask them. So a greeting, and then why you, why them. So you can start off saying, "Good morning, Miss So and So. I was your student in this class, and your class really inspired me in the field of, and then your chosen field. And because of that, I was really hoping if you could write me a recommendation letter because your class really inspired me and it made me want to pursue this in college. And you can cite examples of things that you did in this class so that they can remember you. Oh, they'll think, oh, this was the student who submitted that really good presentation that they left a good comment on, or things like that. Things that jog their memory since they deal with a lot of students, and especially during this time, a lot of people will be asking for letters. So, don't take it personally if they can't remember you. So make the request. So that would be including important details like what school or schools plural if you want to ask them to write multiple. They can write multiple, and it depends where you're applying to, if there's different formats. A good rule of thumb is not to ask them for more than 4 if possible, but you can gauge that personally, or you can talk to the teacher, ask them how many they can take on. And you'll want to also include a school number or an application number if you have that. Some schools do, some schools don't. The deadline for when to submit it or when you need it by, format if there is one, and then your brag sheet. So let's discuss the brag sheet. So it's basically like your resume or your CV, but specifically for recommendation letters. So it's for your teacher to, since obviously they can't remember it off the top of their head, you'll want to provide them examples, things to talk about in the recommendation letter. So that includes your name, contact information, personal statement or intent. So that can be like an incoming grade 12 student who plans to apply to this school, so and so, because blah, 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 wants to study this field and is passionate about so and so. And then your academic achievements and your extracurriculars with descriptions so that they can have a better understanding of what you did and not just see the list of your positions and so and so. And in your personal statement, it's also your chance to show them what kind of student you're trying to be in your application. So it's sort of a subtle way to let them know what kind of student you want to be portrayed as in the letter. Obviously, it depends on them and their experience with you. But let's say, I know a few people in their brag sheet, they put adjectives they want to be described with. So you can do that, but maybe a bit subtler, just list down things that you're passionate about, your values, your principles, so that they also have a good idea of that. So next is letter of continued interest. Now, this isn't as commonly talked about as recommendation letters are, but you might come across it when you're applying to colleges. So it's a letter expressing that you're still interested in attending the school despite being deferred or waitlisted. You can also use it to inform the college of anything you've achieved since submitting your application. So for me, I only had to write one letter of continued interest, and that was when I applied to a school early action, but I wasn't able to give all of the requirements. So I had to be moved to the regular pool of students. And I had to provide a letter saying why I'm still interested in the school. It makes a lot of sense because the school wants to know how much you want to attend. And it's your chance to say, this is why you should admit me. And if you've achieved anything since submitting it, since college applications start really early in the year in grade 12. So if you take on more roles within the year, in the middle of the year, then you can let them know in your letter of continued interest. I think this was also discussed in the essay session a few days ago. So we're almost at the Q&A, but to wrap up this part, I just wanted to reiterate the point that an excellent letter of recommendation can make a good application great. So let's say you write a really good essay and you have really good activities and a really good set of grades, test scores. But something that you really can't underestimate is the letter of recommendation, because the teacher, maybe depending on how good they can write, you might want to consider that too. What they say about you can really change the tone of your application. If you really had an impact on them, or if they're not so close to you, that also has weight when the admissions officer is trying to decide whether or not to let you in, especially if it's quite a competitive school. That can be your edge. So remember to consider your letters of recommendation and the recommenders ahead of time, because they can really build up your application. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A box. But thanks for listening to my talk, and good luck in your applications.
Okay, thank you so much for that informative talk, Marga. I honestly learned so much about like recommendation letters. So yeah, but before we officially wrap this session up, we'll open the floor again for a Q&A session. So remember to send your questions in the Q&A box and not the chat box. So yeah, we can wait for like 1 to 2 minutes. So yeah, just send your questions again in the Q&A box. Oh, okay. So there's one question actually. Just like it's an anonymous question. Just it says, sorry if this is a dumb question, but how do you properly request for a recommendation letter and give your brag sheet? Do you print it out and hand it to teachers when you request for a letter?
Okay. It's not a dumb question at all. I think as long as you're asking questions, you're already ahead of other people, because it shows that you really want to make sure that you do it correctly. So you don't need to worry so much about asking in the correct way. There's not like a formal set way of asking. Let me show you the slide here. I'm not sure if the slide was seen a while ago, but for me, I did most of my asking through email. That's the standard. You email them with your school email, you email their school email, because if your college gets a recommendation from a Gmail account, that's kind of it's a matter of credibility as well. So you ask them through email, but if you're really close to them, the way I am with some of my teachers, you can just message them or ask them in class if there's free time, whichever is most convenient. But usually it's through email, so that they have a copy of your brag sheet already. And you can wait to send the brag sheet until after they've agreed to write you a letter. But for teachers who are really busy, it's not rude to already attach it so that they can see and they don't have to wait for you to send it. So yeah, so email, or really depends on the best way for you.
Okay, thank you so much. There's another question. So I haven't yet prepared any essays or recommendation letters, and I heard the Common App will open on August 1. Is it fine that I could rush it within 2 days?
I wouldn't recommend rushing it within 2 days. Common App opens August 1, yes, but don't worry, you still have a lot of time. I definitely didn't finish my essays by August. Most of the time I applied around October, and the latest I applied to a school was maybe December or January. So as long as you have your school list, schools that you're interested in, and sort of already look at the essay prompts, then you're already good to go. You're on track. I mean, work at your own pace. You don't have to rush, and you really shouldn't rush, because you want it to be a quality answer. This essay response, it can determine whether or not you get into a school. So it's really important. Don't panic, don't rush, and just make sure it's the best it can be. But yeah, you're doing okay if you're starting to prepare just now.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and also I'd like to add that you don't have to finish it because Common App is just opening. Each college will have their own deadline. So really, like what Marga said, no rush. Okay, so um Another question is, hello, can you ask letters from class or club advisors, or should they all be subject teachers?
Yeah, for me, I asked my club advisor that in the club that I was most involved in, but he was also my subject teacher in the previous year. So as long as they're a teacher at your school, you can ask them, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So another question is, how early should we prepare po? Like, before po ba mag-start ng grade 12?
Um, for me, I think it's ideal if you start your essays as soon as you can. Just look at the prompts, maybe pick which ones you want to answer, have ideas of topics that you want to cover. But it's okay if you're not 100% sure about your direction right now. It's still really early, and as long as you keep track of deadlines and dates, you're still good. And you can start asking your teachers maybe a month or 2 or 3 into the school year, so that they already know you when you ask.
Okay, thank you so much. So another question is, for someone who has a low GPA or wherein their grades 9 and 10 GPA is high, and then their GPA for grade 11 drop, do you recommend that we request letter of recommendations from our grade 11 teachers, or just someone who knows us generally, like from grades 9 or 10?
Okay, so for me personally, I don't think grades play a huge role in the letter that you're going to get unless you want it to. But the teacher is more going to focus more on their experience with you, especially if you know them. They're going to talk about who you are as a student, like how you act in the classroom. So if you feel like your teachers in grade 9 and 10, you're really close with them, they can write you a good personalized letter, then you can go for them. Or if you feel that way about your grade 11 teachers, it's okay to ask them. I mean, as long as you didn't fail their class and not try in their class, I think it's okay to ask. Just go on a feeling of, do they know you? Did you try hard in their class? What impression do they have of you?
Okay, thank you. So there's another question. Hi po, how do recommendation letters work? Do teachers send them directly to schools, or are you supposed to send them physically?
I know now, in more recent years, it's majority of it is done through email, especially if you're applying abroad. You invite your teacher to be a recommender. It's in the common app. It's in one of the sections there. You just put their details, and the teacher will take care of the rest. So you just need to inform them, ask them, put their emails, and that's it. I'm not sure if there are any schools who are still doing it physically, but to my knowledge, it's all online.
Thank you so much. Okay, so another question is, when did you apply po? I'm guessing this is like in general, like for like the entire application process. When did you start applying? Because I'm incoming grade 12 and I'm quite nervous.
Okay. So it really depends on the schools that you're applying to. I applied both here in the Philippines and abroad. And for schools here, I'd say that it varies a lot. Ateneo last year, I think around September, I was already preparing. I was already applying. But some schools, the application period was like in October and November. And same goes for US schools. They don't have a strict of a window. You want to double check for sure, but it really depends on the schools. But I would say maybe second, third quarter of the year is usually the time when most schools are opening their applications. And no need to be nervous, just believe in yourself.
Okay, thank you. So another question is, how many I think you touched on this actually, but how many recommendation letters do schools typically ask for?
So for me, on average, it was 2 per school that required them. So your guidance counselor and 1 teacher. Some schools, they'll ask for 3, but most of the time it's just 2. Some schools, they don't require any at all.
Okay, thanks. So another question. When will we be able to start our essays, or when will the essay prompts be given?
Essay prompts, you can see it in the writing section of the Common App, but generally from year to year, it's the same kind of essay prompt. So you can email me. It's MW. Wait, I can just type it in chat, but you can just Google Common App essay prompts and you'll see the essay prompts. And it stays the same year to year, and you have like 5 choices. So don't stress out about it because most of them are kind of similar. Yeah.
Okay. Here's another question. Is it more formal to send them an email to ask? Oh, sorry. Is it more formal to send them an email to ask them to write your letter of recommendation, or is it okay to talk to them personally?
I think it depends on how close you are with the teacher. I know some teachers I just message them, but most of them I email them, especially if I'm not sure that I'm going to see them, and also so that they have already a copy of your brag sheet. They have all of the details so that they don't, they don't have to wait for you to send them after you ask them in real life. So I would recommend email. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Does the Common App recommend to take any SAT test?
Some schools are test optional. So for me, for my school, I didn't take the SAT. I chose not to um take it because not a lot of my schools required it. But if you did take it, it's up to you if you want to submit them or not. Some schools they do require it though, so you can take it if it's accessible to you. And if you get a good score, then I would recommend sending your test scores, but it's not required by all schools. So it's a matter of if it's accessible to you and convenient to you, then you can go for it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, do you think it would be fine to ask a teacher from, let's say, grade 8 to write you a recommendation letter if they know you really well? Or would it still be better to ask someone from your more recent years of schooling?
I think if they know you really well and if they taught a subject that's still relevant or um yeah, still relevant, then I think it's okay to ask. For me, the teacher that I asked like the farthest back was from grade 9 because they know me really well, and even throughout the years we stayed in touch. So I felt okay with asking that teacher. But if there's a teacher who you feel like knows you more recently, since you do grow as a student, who you were in grade 8 might be different, then you might also want to consider asking someone who knows you more recently. But it also depends. You can just gauge for yourself, does this person know me? What kind of letter will they be able to write? So yeah.
Okay. Another question is, for schools or countries with no Common App, how can teachers send reco letters? Is it through the individual application portals as well?
Yeah, it depends on your school. Some of my recommendation letters I sent through Common App. Some of the schools I applied to here, for example, LaSalle, there's a Google form that you'll see in the application portal. And in that Google form is where you put the email of the teacher, the name, and all of the information like that. So yeah, it depends school to school. Just double check.
Okay, thanks. Another question, can you reuse recommendation letters?
Um, can your teacher reuse recommendation letters? I think so. If it's you who if it's just you and you're applying to multiple schools, let's say through the Common App, they can just copy and paste the same one since it's different schools. But um, please also note that you're not going to be able to see your recommendation letters when you 99% of the time you won't be able to see it, because when you submit your recommenders details, you waive the right to be able to see them. It's a confidentiality thing, but also the schools want to make sure that you're not trying to influence the letter in any way, that it's completely private between the teacher and the school. So it's up to the teacher.
Okay, another question. Can the recommendation, oh, sorry, I think this is answered also. So, should brag sheets be personalized depending on the school you're applying to? Like, should certain ECs or strengths be highlighted for different schools?
So generally, for me, I use the same brag sheet, like the same sort of resume, since I have the same extracurriculars. But if you want to highlight certain parts of it for different schools, then you just have to communicate with your recommender about that. It might be a bit of extra work on them, but providing them with a list of schools and what kind of school it is, and let's say you can write them an email. So school one, parentheses, um, this school is more of an arts and sciences school, so a bit more focused on this area of my brag sheet. And then this school is more of a science and math school, so maybe this area of my brag sheet. But usually, there's no problem with highlighting different parts unless it's something that you really want or feel like you need.
Okay, thank you. So, actually, this question isn't really related to recommendation letters. So I think we can skip these ones. But okay, so I found one. I found one that's related to it. So can you still ask teachers who you aren't that close with, but taught subjects that you did good in that you did good in and are very relevant to your major? Since I'm not very close to my grade 9 and 10 teachers because of the pandemic.
Yeah. It's definitely okay. I mean, not all students have a teacher who they're best friends with, and that's another struggle with recommendation letters. I think if the teacher, if you did well in their class and you participated in their class, I think that's definitely understandable, especially if it was during the pandemic. You just want to make sure that in your brag sheet or in your email, you remind them as much as possible um, what you did as a student and experiences that they might have forgotten already. So it's definitely okay.
Okay. Another question. Do you have any tips in making your brag sheet? I think you did also highlight this in your talk, but but they're asking how can you make it so that teachers will understand you more?
Okay, so recalling mine, for me, I'm taking international studies. So a lot of my ECs were focused around that, like MUN, things like that, debate competitions. So it's really about cohesion. Um, we're not gonna have a brag sheet with like 50 different types of activities. Most of the time, it's concentrated to things that are relevant to you. So that kind of story, your teachers can see it already. They see, oh, this is a student who's really passionate about this subject because they've done so much related to it. But you can also put your personal statement. Some schools, instead of essay responses, they ask for a personal statement. So that's a whole other thing. But basically, it's like a bit like an essay, but a bit less abstract. It's like you tell them who you are as a student, what you've accomplished, your grades, why you should be in this program. So you can write something like that for your teacher. You tell them, you re-highlight the points that you really want them to emphasize, and you tell them why you want to study this certain area, why you chose them, why you think that they're the best person to recommend you. Let's say, teacher, blah, 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 your class really helped me. It opened my eyes, and you're the reason I want to do this, and the work really interests me. And just providing them with the context, I think that will help them understand you.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I'm not getting any more questions in the Q&A box. So I think we can wait for just like a minute. And if ever there are no questions anymore, then I think that means that we can conclude our Q&A session and wrap up the talk. So yeah, actually, I also like personally I learned a lot about like recommendation letters. Like I think like even though I am personally done with my college applications, I think like I was able to just see the value in recommendation letters more. So yeah, again, thank you, Marga. So yeah, I think there are no more questions. So with that, I think we can conclude our Q&A session. So again, everyone, thank you for your active participation. And I hope that our beloved speaker was able to shed light on your curiosities and concerns. Okay, there. So shed light on your curiosities and concerns. But if not, maybe the participants can reach out to you, Marga, after the session. I know you did type in the chat like your email. So could you do that again if ever there are people who missed it? So yeah.
Type it now. So yeah, guys, you can also search online. There's so many examples, templates. So yeah, and you can also email me. I can send you my own examples from when I applied. So just reach out if you still have any questions.
Okay. Thank you so much again. And on behalf of CAMP's 2023 facilitation team, I would like to extend our sincerest gratitude and appreciation to you for sharing with us your valuable insights today. We're so grateful for you accepting our panel invitation. And again, let's give a round of virtual applause for Marga. So yeah, I hope this session got you guys excited because we'll be having our next session very soon. So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you, Marga.
Thank you.